Rod, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Nate, how are you?
I'm great, man. I'm really happy that I've got you on, and I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you don't do anything at Triumph, and you got plenty of extra time, so this is easy.
We're just sitting back during these great COVID times, Nate.
Yeah, no doubt. Boy, I want to dive into that too, but so Rod, you are the general manager of Triumph North America.
Yep, correct.
And or what I would call the big cheese. I think that's what we call you. You know, I've known you since 2016 when you joined Triumph.
Yeah.
And I did not know you before that. And I know a lot of people know you, but I did a little research before this podcast. And boy, you are all over the power sports industry for a very long time. You've been into this for a while. I think I'd be afraid to talk to you if I didn't know you first.
This is my whole life. I mean, basically I grew up, my grandfather owned a Yamaha BSA dealership in New Jersey. This is all I've ever known. I grew up racing motocross and flat tracking and just having a ball as a kid. And then it grew, my passion grew into, getting on the OEM side a little later after running a bunch of different dealerships in the New York, New Jersey area. And then, I've spent 19 years at Suzuki in various roles to running the motorcycle division. I spent some time at Takaraki as the vice president of business development and international sales. And then I also spent some time at AMA Pro Racing when they were separate as the vice president of sales for the racing side. So yeah, I've been around the block a few times.
Yeah, no doubt. That's what I wanted to ask you about. Is I don't know your background. I'm just learning this now. I didn't know that you grew up in a dealership. So your dad or your parents started a dealership?
Yeah, my grandfather was actually the first Yamaha dealer in New Jersey, but he started as a BSA dealer. And then, as you know, like in the early 70s, as BSA had their financial troubles and they went out of business, I believe it was in 72. Then he got aggressive in the Yamaha business. So that's how I, really got involved and was fortunate enough to have dirt bikes as a kid, an old JT1, which most people don't know on, is a 60cc Yamaha that I learned on, and then, went through the whole gamut of all the different YZs. And then in 83, my grandfather passed away and my grandmother made the decision to just sell the business and basically retire. And then I went to work for a few competitive dealers in the area, running their stores as their GM. And that was a blast. I did that for probably about 10 years in 3 different stores, primarily with all the Japanese brands. And then had the opportunity to go work for Suzuki and started as a district sales manager down in Washington, D.C., Baltimore area. Did that for a few years and then headed out to California to run the ATV division at Suzuki. So I spent a lot of time doing that and then became the national sales manager and then the head of the motorcycle division. And then I was fortunate enough to get the opportunity to come over here, and join the Triumph team.
So did you go to school for any business or I mean, tell me about your...
No, I'm graduated high school and really just put my nose to the grindstone, Nate. It's kind of I always tell people jokingly, a few people get to go right to the pros, like some of the professionals, and I was one of the lucky ones. I worked really hard at it, and it was definitely challenges because you have to always prove yourself, because not having that, but I like making money too much when I was young, being in sales in the dealership. So I had a hard time saying, I need to quit doing this, making money and having fun selling what I love to go back to school. So I really challenged myself personally to learn everything I could about being the absolute best operator. And as you know better than anyone, there's a million ways to run a dealership. You think you're the best, and then all of a sudden you talk to people like yourself and you're like, well, they do it different, but it's pretty amazing what they do, And then as you start to experience that, you kind of put that in your file cabinet, and you learn a lot of things and then, you get to meet great people. And I think that's one of the amazing things about our industry is just how damn good the people are. And that's what makes it even more fun, And then, just work hard, prove myself, finally got a break at Suzuki to get an opportunity to get on the OEM side. And then just continued, doing what I love. And it really made it easy for me, Nate, because it was motorcycles are fun.
Yeah, that's one thing I was thinking about. I'm like, man, you've been into motorcycles since as long as you can remember, obviously.
Yeah.
Did you have any other passions that you also like put a bunch of your energy into outside of the motorcycle industry?
Not really from, an employment or, what I wanted to do for my life. I loved everything about motorcycles. I was a product junkie. I mean, I love working on them. I literally enjoyed every piece of it. I loved riding. I loved all the stars and that were involved in motocross and drag racing, road racing, and I wanted to be a part of all of it. So worked really hard at it, and I've been given some of the most amazing opportunities. And the cool thing is you get to meet people, great people, and I've been fortunate to be surrounded by really good people, and that were kind enough to give me the opportunity to get me where I am today.
I think you're being a little bit modest. You earned
Well,
that for sure. I mean, it's
it's a
nice to have.
combination.
Yeah, it always is, isn't it?
Yeah,
So, I mean, I was thinking about just in the amount of time that you've been in this industry, the amount of dealerships that you've gotten to know, and the amount of dealer
yeah,
owners and principals that you've gotten to know through 20 groups and through just obviously you have a relationship with every Triumph dealer and a pretty strong one. You're very approachable and anybody can talk with you about an issue that they're having within the dealership. But that must give you an incredibly broad scope of what's going on in the industry. Just because you get to see so many different approaches and you get to see how like similar approaches have similar results
yeah,
or similar lack of results,
yeah, yeah, right,
I would
right.
guess. Um, how do you how does that play into your day to day? I mean, you're the GM. Uh, you have a massive amount of things under your umbrella of control. What are some of the things that you focus on sort of on a day-to-day basis?
Kind of my mantra daily, from a dealer perspective, is that from all the experience I've had is, you try to look at everything every day. What can I do to support the most dealers every day? The U.S. North America is a huge piece of real estate to manage, right? And as you said, whether it's weather related, if there's dynamic things happening in different cities, whatever it is, there's different things happening all around the country. So you really try to blanket to every decision you make to do the most you can for the most dealers. And now it's not always perfect for every dealer, but you do your best to support as many dealers with every decision you make. And it's a tough thing. It's no different than managing your staff. When you make a decision, how is this? It's going to affect everybody differently, but you want to make a decision that's going to be the best for the most possible people. And it's really the same, logic I use every day, with decisions that we make.
So I was just trying to formulate a thought there on that. Um, you seem to have always been since I've known you for sure, very focused on finding out from the dealers what the dealers need from the OEM. And I think if people are listening and they're not familiar with the motorcycle industry, it's an interesting industry as far as how inventory is managed, because the OEM has to produce the units and they have
Yeah.
to really be experts at forecasting, sprinkled in with a little bit of magic, a little bit of guessing of what the environment's going to be. And that thought process carries forward to not only just the model year, but individual bikes within that model year, how many you need to produce, gauging what sort of dealer demand is going to be and gauging what consumer demand is going to be, which
Right.
is one thing they all push up. But
Sure.
um, it's an interesting relationship between the dealers and the manufacturers, because the dealers, all the dealers have sort of different independent ideas of what they want for inventory or how they want to display things. But yet a brand like Triumph has a brand to brand.
Yeah, right,
So
right.
a certain amount of consistency is extremely important when customers go into a Triumph dealership or Suzuki dealership or
Yeah,
any
yeah.
dealership, that there's some level of consistency. Otherwise, the brand falls apart and becomes a bunch of independent cowboys, all over the country.
Absolutely.
And I imagine that's probably the most difficult part of your job or one of the most difficult would be the differences in opinions from an independent dealer versus what you have to think about when you're putting a program together that has to sort of be the best as it can be for all. And how does that work when you guys are inside looking at these types of levels? I mean, you have to look at, okay, we as Triumph need to sell stuff, but you don't really sell them. You sell them when the dealership sells them. So,
well, I mean, it's tough. The great thing for us in the U.S. and Canada as well is we have great data. Being a part of the MIC, the Motorcycle Industry Council, really helps us. So we can, by color, by model, by brand, for the 15 companies that support the MIC, we can tell exactly where they're sold, when they're sold. So that really gives us a good initial foundation to building that, because we know the competitors, the likely competitors, and who we're going to sell against. We can tell where all the other competitive dealers are. You put all this data, all this information in, and we also do a competitive analysis. How good is our bike? How is it going to stack up against everyone else? And then we know the general performance of each dealer. So you put all that in, into the pot and you stir it up, and then you come out with your best formulated, answer, because ultimately we do give the product to the dealers to sell, but if it backlogs at the dealers and they don't sell it, it's going to impact us. So ultimately we really have to focus on the retail piece of it, to keep the pipeline moving, because then we'll just be in a more difficult situation, that following year. So yeah, there's a ton of work that goes into that magic number, every time, because you do want to maximize for the dealer and for Triumph as well, every retail unit. So, but I think a great thing for us is we're in a fortunate situation that we do have so much incredible data to give us really a good foundation.
Do you ever find that data? Do you ever find that you get stuck, or I could say Triumph in general, the people that make these decisions get stuck because they get too emotionally involved with a particular model or something? Let's say there's a new model that Triumph's been working on and everybody's really enthusiastic about it. And as you're looking at the numbers, they might not be as strong as your emotional hope for this product is going to do. And how do you balance those two things?
I think that's a great point, Nate, because I would say most of the people in this industry are motorcyclists, right? And we all have our favorite segment that we either grew up doing or we still ride at today, so if we're building a bike that meets your own personal taste, right away you're like, that's a beautiful thing about motorcycle people. They'll be like, I want one of those, right? So as soon as you feel that emotional electricity, you have to remind yourself, like, hey, you're not buying this, and then you got to go back to the product concept and then who the core customer is designed for this bike, and you got to focus on that and focus on all the focus groups that we do on those specific ones, and go back to those really hard columns that were built to support that model, and really focus on that data. And I think that's one of the, I would say, coming to Triumph, one of the most amazing things that they do is they really do a lot of research on our customer, the Triumph brand, competitive analysis, and also, new models that are coming out to really give us the most accurate picture. There's always data and then there's reality, right? The minute one of us can find out, like looking at that, and we can give the exact number, boy, that would be the greatest thing in the world with anything, right? The stock market would end. So that's the magic, but Triumph gives us an incredible amount of tools with all the research they do. So that definitely helps us kind of point in that right direction.
And I'm having one of those days.
It's all right. We all have them.
There's so much I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about like all the procedures and processes that you've put in place. And I've seen the changes from when you took over as a GM to do things like make sure that there's not a glut of inventory on parts and things like that. at the warehouse because that costs a ton of money. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it's incredibly important to have parts available for quick turnaround to service the customers. And that's another inventory management game that takes a ton of sophistication.
Yeah.
You folks have put some really high level. I mean, you're an OEM. The level of sophistication that you've put into this data always blows me away when I end up going to Triumph and we talk to people in the marketing department. Look at how advanced they are with some of the marketing tools, or how advanced that you guys are with some of the inventory management tools, and always looking for new stuff. Is that one of those just constant improvement things where you're always working to, well, let me ask you this way. What are the types of things that you're always looking at making more efficient?
Yeah, I think, one of the things, one of the mantras that we carry is KITS, KITS, keep it Triumph simple. That's something that we really pushed about. We stole that from the keep it simple, stupid, 2 years ago when I took over, to really look at, doing business is hard enough in general, as you very well know. So what are the things that we can look at to really make it simplified, both for the dealer and internally? And we've done a good job, but there's still, room to grow at that. And it's something that the management team here, we meet, we discuss it, they come up with ideas, and what do we see on a monthly basis? What bubbles up to be our biggest challenges? It could be as simple as one of our challenges, replacement keys. We don't do a job that I feel is to where we should be with replacement keys, and that's something we're working really hard at right now. And we're literally going to bring a key machine in to Triumph North America here, and we're going to cut the keys. So we're not counting on an outside vendor to support us in that, right? Because the more layers you add, the more complexity and issues you get. So we're always looking for those things. We use Salesforce, we track everything. So it's very easy for us to do a monthly report and see what are we having the most problems, where are they, right? And we're not perfect, but we really try to chisel away at the ones we can, those top 5 or 10 items every month that we constantly see. And how do we make it easier for the dealer? How do we make it easier for the customer and also internally? So there's things that, it's a constant battle. We're always trying, and technology changes, the competition changes, of course our dealers change. The COVID, brought on challenges for all of us that no one ever experienced, and I think we're all still learning, right? So how do we, we're constantly doing that. Yeah, it's a great question. We constantly push the envelope on that, on how do we continue to improve and make it, even easier to do business. And as easy is good, better for everybody,
Well, I'm a big believer in successful businesses remove friction from their industries.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to be successful, then all you have to do is look at how to add value to whatever you're doing by addressing the friction or the difficulty that exists within your industry. I mean, that's been our mantra. That's what we do
100%,
constantly.
100%.
And those areas of friction change. Like, in particularly, let's talk about what happened with COVID. When March came around, I really thought for a couple of weeks that I thought, well, this is it. It's been a nice 19-year run, and there's a good chance I'm going to lose my dealership, because if we're dealing with a pandemic where people can't even see each other face to face, no one's going to buy a motorcycle. And the funny thing is the exact opposite happened. It turns out that riding motorcycles is a fantastic thing to do if you're social distancing, and with people not spending their money on things like restaurants and going out to eat, people had a little bit more expendable income. I could never have anticipated this was going to happen.
Yeah.
But it caused some other problems. And this pattern that happened in our industry, and just to finish that thought, our industry has done extremely well in this time. Everybody's a little blown away by going, wow, that was unexpected.
Yeah.
But it has presented some legitimate problems. And in any industry that's experiencing what we are, bicycle industry, RV industry, marine industry, it seems any outdoor recreation right now has gone through the roof. And the byproduct of that has been a very big delay in manufacturing and supply.
Yeah.
How are you guys coping with that? How much has it affected you?
Yeah, so when March hit, it was definitely a big challenge, and then at some point, through late March, early April, of course, our parent company in the UK did shut down, all the manufacturing. And when that happens, there's definitely, most people think it's just a switch. Everybody goes back in and starts working again, and we produce motorcycles. It's not that easy. You have all the vendors, getting all the parts, everything in line, for the whole stream to build the products. So it's pretty amazing how Triumph actually has done an incredible job. And of course, we did lose some production, but they've worked really hard to add shifts at the manufacturing facilities and catch up. And I would say we're in a pretty good spot, Nate. Product will be a little lean, in comparison to previous years, but the factory, the management team in the UK has done an amazing job, and we'll be in pretty good shape, and we'll be able to support dealers at a fairly good level. They're not perfect. Key hot models. I mean, like the amazing Tiger 900. Boy, we ran super lean on those, and it's still lean right now. Some of the Rocket 3 GTs are lean, and then there's a spattering of other models, but we'll be in a fairly good shape. But the great thing is that control of inventory. We're hearing dealers are making record profits, and doing exceptionally well. Due to the excitement, the growth in motorcycling, and then, inventory being a little bit tight. So it won't be perfect. It will be a little tight, but, the team's up for the task, and we're going to work hard to move product around and continue to support the dealers the best that we can.
Well, I think this highlights a mentality for successful businesses as well. I mean, COVID's a radical swing, but the reality is behind running any business, supply and demand greatly affects return on investment.
Yeah.
So as the demand goes up, if you don't have enough supply, typically your margin would go up because the demand for the product is higher. So there's an opportunity there, but you lose sales because there isn't enough product available. This is a normal balance that any business person that carries, that isn't selling information, any business that's selling a product always has to play with this balance. If you're sloppy with the inventory and you've got 3 years worth of non-moving parts on the shelf, it doesn't matter what you're making for a margin on the stuff you are selling because all of your money is tied up and sitting on the shelf. So it's cash flow versus profit margin.
Yeah.
And, when we have a decrease in available product and an increase in margin, then it's a different way to make a return on investment. And I guess it's just nothing more than commentary saying COVID's a radical example, but we have to deal with this on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I mean, and I've seen Triumph swing from being heavily stocked on parts and supplies or clothing, parts and accessories and clothing, to realizing, it's getting a little heavy in the warehouse. We got to cut some of that back, or cut the number of products we have back and consolidate.
Right. Streamline. Yeah.
Because you can easily, doesn't matter how much money you make, you can easily end up being in huge trouble if you have too much inventory.
Yeah. 100%.
So, there's blessing and a curse to this current situation for sure.
Oh yeah, there is.
And I think we're seeing it on the used side. It's sort of like when the stock market is at the top, and that's when the people who don't look at the stock market decide, I guess I should get into the stock market, but they're behind.
Yeah, right,
and
right.
I think we're going to see some of that. I'm certainly seeing the prices on used bikes for us to purchase them, certainly at auctions and things of those sorts, are still exorbitantly high. Like some of the prices I'm seeing dealerships pay for used bikes, I don't know how they're going to retail out of.
Yeah.
So, this is all part of business, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a trend, right? And we'll learn from this, and there's good things. You'll get best practices out of it. I think, slowing down the processes in the dealerships. A lot of our appointment only has really helped dealers. It's forced them to come up with a process, and having that process is help their staff, help their bottom line. So it's really done some good things too, which is interesting, because back in March, none of us would have believed anything good would have come from this.
No, for sure. I mean, you bring up a really interesting point, and I think about this a lot. When this first started to happen and we figured out how we were going to handle it, we ran an ad that said, we've been we've been preparing for this for 19 years. We as a company are a web-based company, and we've sold thousands and thousands and thousands of motorcycles to people we had never met. This is
Right.
how we do business. So when this whole COVID thing happened, we didn't have to do anything except for highlight that we already know how to do this really well and we're experienced. But there's a ton of other dealerships that knew that they needed to step it up in this area, and they've known for years. This is the push that made them. So I think overall, the whole market for consumers is going to get better. I think as more dealerships get better at working with people remotely, it's good for our industry. It's another silver lining in this big mess.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It's forced dealers to, learn where you probably would have kept doing the norm, right? What you did day in and day out. And this has forced dealers to learn, to kind of move into the 21st century, right? In regard to technology and all the amazing things, just like the Zoom calls, right? Nobody would ever talk about them before. And now it's as common as texting, right?
I don't ask anybody anymore when we're doing the podcast, hey, do you have Zoom?
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's totally amazing. So I think the lessons, and I think that's the beautiful thing about the power sports industry is how resilient, the dealers are. They really, it's amazing to hear all the great stories. You know what? I got to buy another delivery vehicle because I'm delivering more stuff to people in their homes, right? All the things where they've chameleonized, right? Changed to whatever they needed to do, and that's, the successful dealers always do that. But I think it's really been highlighted, over the last 6-7 months, and the lessons that come from this is only going to make them a better dealer going forward.
All this investment isn't just for the meantime. It's going to carry forward for sure. Yeah. So do you have any examples you can think of off the top of your head of some things that some changes that some dealerships have done that have had great results as a result of having to change?
Well, I mean, just simple things, Nate, like appointment schedules being available online, whether it be for, scheduling a service, right? Because there's just a high amount of people who don't want to get face-to-face, right? And they're very comfortable in scheduling service, even parts purchases, even a lot of stories about dealers selling stuff. And, this guy didn't even come to my house. We completed the entire deal over the phone. And we ended with, hey, as long as when you show up in my driveway, everything's still the same, I'm going to happily, buy the motorcycle and everything that we've agreed on, and how they've had to buy, get extra drivers, buy extra vehicles to deliver products, simply because of the dynamic and the change. And, it's been amazing to see how dealers like literally adapted to it. And, remember a lot of dealers reduced staff going back in March and April because many people thought the world was ended from a power sports, standpoint. And in some cases, they couldn't get those good staff members back, right? So retraining people and all that is just amazing how they've done all this, and with the success we're seeing across the board, from kids' dirt bikes to the older gentleman buying a cruiser or a classic, right? I mean, across the board, every segment is very, very healthy, and it's because the dealers, they had that ability to change and do all the things that they needed to do from a parts, service, and a retail sales standpoint.
That's one thing I'm very encouraged about, actually, is the narrative, the predominant narrative in the motorcycle industry prior to this year was the aging out of our customers. The biggest market that I serve, and I think it's probably, I probably generally say it's probably most of the motorcycle industry, is the baby boomer generation. Yeah. And they're aging out of motorcycling. Well, thank God we've got trikes, because a ton of them are able to continue to ride by getting a trike. Right. And the whole trikes used to be looked at a little bit differently than they are now. You didn't see them very often, and people kind of turn their nose down. Now it's just a thriving part of the industry, so a thriving segment. But the narrative before was young people aren't riding motorcycles. And when this COVID thing started to happen, we saw the demand for off-road go through the roof. And people were calling saying, hey, I'm at home with my kid. I got to get him a dirt bike. I got to get him a PW50 or a XR. and the demand for ATVs, UTVs, and kids bikes have gone through the roof. And for me, that feels like we might have had another little silver lining, because if we just spurred a whole new generation to
Yeah.
fall in love with motorcycles, our industry's been trying to figure out how to do it. I guess we just needed a pandemic.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then I look at it as like little league, right? It's that's our little league. We get all those kids, boys and girls riding motorcycles, having fun. Like all of us have. That made the hair stand up on your arms when you were a kid. Now they're doing it, right? They're going to experience. So they'll come to want to buy a Street Twin or a Tiger 900, right? That they're going to grow up, and in a few years we're going to see the benefits of all that. So I'm super ecstatic to see the off-road ATV and side-by-side market, that electric, because they're going into dealerships, right? And that's
Yeah.
what we need to happen. And that's going to prove that in the future, the next 5 years is going to be healthy for us.
Yeah, I'm encouraged about that as well.
Yep.
The other thing that I'm kind of excited about is electric vehicles. And I
Yeah.
know Triumph is, I mean, I don't think there's an OEM that's not taking it seriously now at this point. And it is a crazy industry. It's like the Wild West right now. There's a million different interpretations of how to approach the electric market.
Yeah.
What's Triumph doing?
Yeah. They're working hard at it. I think the big thing for us is figuring out, what does the consumer want an electric Triumph to be, and as I said, with Triumph, the great thing is they do a ton of research. So I would say now, as far as building the motorcycle and the technology, from that standpoint, the design team and engineers, I don't see that as being a problem. We make world-class motorcycles. So that, I'm not going to say is the easy part, but that's the fundamental foundation that they do all the time. Now it's really doing the research, trying to figure out exactly what, the motorcycle customer expects from an electric Triumph. And that, I think, that's the gray area out there. I'm sure everybody's trying to figure that out. How do we keep our distinctive, cool, authentic, and premium, the legs to the Triumph brand in an electric bike, right? Because you don't have that sound, right? So what are those key features? Of course, we can do the styling, no problem. That's easy. But how do we make it cool? How do we make it authentic Triumph? So the UK team is aggressively doing research now, focus groups, to really find out, what does the customer want, and what are the key attributes. Of course, distance is a big one, right? How far can you go on a charge, right?
Yep.
And us being Americans, it's unique, or the Canadians, to where they're big countries, so you can't, it's not a small country to where, if you can go, 100 miles, that's okay. We need a few hundred miles really to make an electric motorcycle, be a quality piece of recreation or even transportation.
Yeah.
So, the research will show us that, not only from a styling, a features, benefits, performance aspect, but what are the key, things that customers really want to see, like range.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other segment that it really does feed back into what we were just talking about getting more of a dirt bike crowd back into motorcycles and bringing up another generation. There's been a gigantic shift from street bikes to adventure motorcycles.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I see the same shift in bicycles, and I wonder how much all of this shift has to do with people on their phones and people not paying attention when they're driving, and people on two wheels, whether it's a bicycle or motorcycle, saying, I need to get away from those people. And then they go out in the woods and go, oh my God, this is more fun anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
That market segment has exploded, hasn't it?
It has. Adventures, is definitely the hot button in the motorcycle industry. You think back, like when cruisers took over, and we're super positive. Adventures there now. All the brands are making an amazing product, so it gives the consumer just incredible choices out there. Technology's at its all-time high with all the brands. I mean, with the new Tiger 900, just what that motorcycle can do is simply amazing. I mean, you can go off-road and you can go touring with it, right? So you're seeing a lot of crossover from all the different segments to where, it's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. It can almost do everything good, and I think it talks to a lot of people, whether you're someone young who wants to go out and experience the different variations that motorcycles allow, or someone who's coming off another specific segment, but I can still go touring on this. And I also can do some, light off-road riding, So it just speaks to so many people, and I continue to see it grow. And I think the great thing about the motorcycle industry is they're very good at specializing. As you think back just 10 years ago, there was a handful of adventure models, right, from all the brands. Now we have specialization to more off-road to road, and then the displacement sizes are growing every year from everyone. So, I don't see the segment slowing down,
I don't either. And there's other technologies that are helping to fuel that. When you look at GPS applications or mapping applications, and then the fact that we have, user groups all over where people will share files. Hey, I spent the last 6 months putting this 400-mile route together, and it only goes on class 4 roads. Or in the bicycle world, they've been doing this for a while with bike packing. They call it bike packing instead of backpacking. And they'll have themed routes. Like there's one in Vermont called the Vermont Growl Grinder or Gravel Growler.
Okay.
And it's a tour of 12 different craft breweries in Vermont, but it's done on your bicycle throughout the woods. And these types of things, there's a big 1,000-mile route that goes through New England now for ADV bikes that you can download, and you can see where the next gas station is on your GPS, and you can say, oh, there's a rough section coming up, and you can navigate. So other industries' advances are fueling this.
Yeah, it makes it easier and more enjoyable, right?
Yeah, sure does. It makes it more accessible, and that's a word that gets used a lot in the motorcycle industry.
Yeah, well, and I think you said it earlier. What we're seeing now too is all the recreational industries are booming.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that just adds to adventure riding. People want to get outdoors. What better tool than to use in an adventure bike? I mean, you can almost go anywhere.
Yeah.
On one of them, and I continue to see the success. As everyone adds more models, and I know we're hot on it. We're going to be adding new models to it. We just introduced a new Tiger 850 Sport just a day ago. So, and that's because the specialization, everybody has different wants and needs, and in adventure, it's kind of interesting and exciting because you can address their needs a lot, because there's a lot of hybrid to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's different. It's fun. If you've been riding on the street for years and years, and, maybe this brings back a little feeling of like what it was like to ride your bicycle or your dirt bike as a kid. And it is making people just.
Well, I see you have your Patagonia hat on. So if you remember, we had an amazing time down in South America.
We did. That was probably the first time I've spent much time on an adventure bike. We were lucky enough to be one of the top dealers in the country and get to go on a top dealer trip to Patagonia, of all places, which I've always wanted to go to. Thank you for that opportunity.
No, thank you. You brought me there.
We had an incredible time. I mean, to go see Patagonia and then to see it on adventure bikes, it was amazing.
Amazing riding, great group of people riding. It was the weather was challenging at times, but I think now looking back on it, it gave you a true understanding of adventure riding, right? We've had every experience possible from a weather standpoint.
Yeah, I remember driving on one stretch where the wind was hitting us sideways so much it felt like you had to hold the bike sideways to even keep it vertical. It's an amazing place. The mountains are big and the weather's extreme there.
Absolutely. That was fun trip.
No doubt about it. So, boy, I got so much stuff that I'm really curious to like what your day to day looks like. I mean, because like you seem to get pulled in 500,000 different directions, and you're sort of at a pivotal point where a lot of things revolve around you coordinating things. What's your day to day like? Do you have any semblance of normalcy, or are you just?
Yeah, the good thing for me is, we've built a really good team here. I got a really good team of managers, so. You're as good as the people around you. So that's really, really been helpful. I think everybody's day now with COVID makes it a little more hectic because you don't know, you want to make sure, of course, the dealers are safe. You want to also make sure your staff is safe, and the challenge with school, for some people, for your staff is a challenge. So really we need to be here to support the dealers. So that's the number one thing, is making sure everybody's healthy and safe. And then how do we make sure we have staff here because of all those challenges that COVID brings, so that's the challenge. And then, it's start early and end late, Nate. That's
Yeah.
that's the power sports business. But I love it. And Triumph's been just on fire, to be honest. The last 4 or 5 months have just been incredible. We've had record retail months for the company in the history. So that makes it a little more busy, trying to make sure that we have everything in place. But yeah, I mean, it's busy, but it's not crazy. I enjoy it every day.
That's something you do seem to enjoy it every single day. I don't know if I've really ever seen you without a smile on your face. And how do
It
you do it?
happens. It
How do you
happens.
do it? I'm sure it does happen. But I mean, it makes me wonder, I mean, I have a lot less responsibilities to take care of than you do, and I get outwardly stressed where I'm not very good at hiding it for people. Is this just your personality, or have you done anything like meditation or religion, or is there anything that you sort of use to kind of keep yourself even keeled?
Nah, I think it's just I love doing this. This has really honestly been my whole life, so I really enjoy it. I enjoy the opportunity to try to make things better. I enjoy working with dealers like yourself and all over the country. It's fun. They become friends and like family, right? It
Yeah.
just we're always going to disagree on things, but it's about communication, being good people and talking it through. There's always something we can do together to make it better, right? It might not be perfect. So that's my theme is just the power of positive. It's being positive is way better than being negative. And I you lose it at times, but I try. I push that on my kids every day. Is you got to stay positive in life. You just have to. It just makes things better. And yeah, I get frustrated at times, but I do my best not to. But it does happen.
Well, I think you certainly have a reputation for it not happening very much.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I'll embarrass you a little bit. But when I was doing research on you, I ran across a quote it was on Motocross Action magazine,
Uh-huh.
and they were announcing that you had come back to Suzuki.
Uh,
And the headline said, uh, one of the good guys is
uh,
coming back to Suzuki. And I was looking at that like, boy, that's a big compliment. Motocross Action, when someone goes, hey, man, not just the company, but the industry's happy to see you come back
yeah.
and grab a hold of something. So obviously your attitude has been part of why you've been able to continue to just move all the way up in the industry. And I understand you just became a member of the board of directors for the Motorcycle Industry Council.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
That's
just
a heck of an honor right there. That's
yeah.
a
Yeah. Yeah.
impressive board of people on that organization.
Yeah, it's a great group of people. It's a great organization, they're working super hard to make things better. So yeah, I'm just happy to be a part of it. If I can give the industry's been really good to me. Like I said, I've got to meet amazing people and do amazing things that I never thought as a kid, on a dirt bike that I would ever get that opportunity. So now, I look at it as, hey, I just want to give back to everybody and give other people the same opportunity that I had. And I just want to treat people like I want to be treated.
Yeah, man, it's a
It
common
seems so.
sense.
Yeah, exactly. Just treat people good, and you should be treated good back. And that's just what I've always lived by. And it for the most part it works. So
Yeah.
it's nice to hear those things, and I think it's just because I try to treat people fair and honest. And if I
Yeah.
can do something to help, I absolutely will, and I'll go out of my way. But I'll also be honest and tell you when I can't.
Yeah. I think that's important, isn't it?
Yeah, it
You
is.
can't blow smoke. You've got to go,
Yeah,
look, man, I don't want to give you any unreal expectations. It's probably
yeah,
not going to happen.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So where do you see, like, with this unexpected spike in the industry, how do you start to project out from there? Everybody gets very optimistic. And then there's a side that goes, well, we always have to keep one eye on the economy, on the stock market, on people's general feeling, because what
Yeah,
we sell is not, I mean, it's expendable income
it's
item. It
not a
is not
necessity,
something that,
right? Yeah,
yeah. So when you're looking at, I mean, we're going to be looking at these numbers throughout the industry. Everybody did well. I mean, if you
yeah, yeah.
didn't do well, then it were other fundamental problems you probably had prior to this. But you're going to see a big spike in the data, and you guys are really data driven. How do you sort of account for it, or what are you guys talking about inside about how to project forward? This has got to make it difficult.
Well, what we do is we try to go back and look at, a couple of years collectively, right? And you look at those numbers and you say, I don't really see how this can just fall off a cliff tomorrow. Like January is not going to be down 70%, right? So you try to realistically look at that and you average it out amongst, any other years that you had where there were super, big challenges for whatever reason. So you go back and you look at that, and then you look at, a 2 or 3 year span collectively, and you try to be as clear and fair and honest and not over project as much as, humanly possible. And I think that gives us at least confidence that we're not being crazy or you're not going overboard, and I would say that's the good thing with Triumph. We're not, we're conservative, but of course we want to grow and we want to give the dealers every opportunity to sell all the product that they can. But we're not saying, hey, we expect to see a 30% increase every month, for the next year. So really, it's just trying to look at the whole picture, use as much information as we have. I mean, we're all information junkies, and sometimes that's good, and sometimes that's bad. You don't really know which is the right. But I don't see it falling off a cliff at all, Nate. I think that we're in a good spot. There's a lot of excitement about motorcycling in all aspects, which creates excitement because then you tell your friend, right? And that goes on. And I think that's what we're seeing some of the, other people getting involved now is because it's growing. There's a lot of people on motorcycles. There's a lot of people talking about motorcycling, and it's absolutely one of the best things you can do in a pandemic. Mm-hmm. But I don't see it, hopefully we do get a cure for this or a vaccine here shortly. But I think this wave is going to continue for a while. I do believe that, I think it's going to. I don't see it falling off a cliff, but I don't see it, skyrocketing 30 or 40% either.
Yeah. Did the UK or other countries have the same sort of increase, or was this a North American or United States sort of phenomenon? Because the cultures are very different.
Yeah,
and
we've seen really good. I would say everybody was on a little bit different pattern based on the government shutdown periods. But once they did open back up and there was like some guidelines to COVID in those countries, many of the other big countries, Germany, France, Italy, has seen really, really equal type of growth and excitement around motorcycling. So definitely COVID, put a spotlight on outdoor recreation, and motorcycling overall is definitely one of the winners, for that, which is, simply amazing. Now we just have to continue that as an industry, right? And keep the excitement about motorcycling, because even without COVID, it's still one of the most incredible things you can do.
Yes, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I'm a fan.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah. I don't really have a ton more specific. I mean, when we sit down and we get together and chat, man, we usually tear apart like areas of industry.
We can go for hours.
Yeah, we have before, and when we get talk about business philosophies, about, raising the bar on yourself, like, everything that we talked about with COVID forcing dealerships or forcing industries to get better at certain areas because it's now an emergency and it's on fire. You better fix this or you're not going to make any sales.
Yeah.
I'm just, I think it's hard to talk about silver linings when people are dying in a pandemic. It's a very weird.
It's uncomfortable, right?
It's very uncomfortable. It's like, I don't want to tell people that we're up. It just doesn't seem right. But the reality is that in one sense, this virus is refocusing us on family, on outdoors, on health.
Your core values, right?
Yeah, the things that are really important for people that were working 80 hours a week and never home, and now they're home and they get to spend some time with their kids and maybe
birthday parties or whatever, right? They're attending and being more a part of it. Yeah, there's a lot of great things that have definitely come from this.
Yeah, hard to imagine that it would actually spur a fix to one of the biggest problems that our industry had of getting new riders into riding, because it limited the other stuff that people were doing instead.
Well, and I think that's one of the things as Americans, we're fortunate. There's so many different things you can do from sporting, recreation, right? There's so many options that this definitely refocused a lot of people to say, how amazing is it to get out on a motorcycle with my family in many cases and simply just enjoy the outdoors and experience riding, right? It's amazing.
Yeah, it's meditative. I mean, it really, it's one
yeah,
of those things where you're riding a motorcycle, and as they say, the wind is in your hair,
yeah.
and you're out in nature, moving through it, breathing the fresh air. It's a massive stress reliever, and I think people are discovering that every bit as much. It relieves. I used to have a 10-minute drive home from work on a motorcycle. That 10 minutes, of course, I would make it half an hour and go all the back road if you could. But that time after work to get on your motorcycle where you can't talk to anybody and you're riding and you're focusing on the right apex in your turn and looking out for dirt on the road and watching the animals and it just everything around you. It's amazing how much stress that blows out of you. And you get home, you're like, that
goes away right away, right? It's like a release valve. It's simply amazing. It truly is.
Yeah, it is. I hope more people continue to get into it because
me too.
It's good for all of us.
Yeah, me too.
And I hope they get it at our shop.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know you're a busy guy, and I'm going to let you go, but I really appreciate you coming on just to talk.
No, I enjoyed it, Nate. It's great. I love to talk about the industry. It's great to see you. Let's do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll be talking soon. We got all kinds of things we're working on.
Oh, we do. Yeah, absolutely. Never ends.
All right. Thanks, Rod. And I'll talk to you soon.
You got it, Nate. Thank you, buddy.